All right, flight simmers, welcome back. This is Beetle Beast, and we are back again in the CJ4 on this very rainy day in the town of Hopkinsville, Kentucky. The weather looks kind of crummy, and that is on purpose, obviously. We're trying to do a video today for shooting instrument approaches, or not a bunch of instrument approaches, but specifically an RNAV instrument approach. There was a comment on my previous video, which is the Proline 21 tutorial, in which one of the viewers wanted to see what it's like to shoot a RNAV approach. So we're going to go ahead and do that today. The other comment was, what is it like to navigate to an alternate airport? So we're going to go through both of these. I'm going to go through a little bit of the thought process that a pilot's going to have if they are going through this kind of, in real time. We'll talk about the missed approach segment of an approach itself, how to set that up, how to talk your way through it, and kind of how to prep for it beforehand so that it's not an issue. The flight today is very short, 49 miles from Hopkinsville to John Tune. John Tune is Juliet Whiskey November. It's right next to Nashville. It's a little small airport, about 5,500 feet of runway. Near Nashville, used for a lot of business aviation aircraft. Looks like 6,000 feet of runway. A lot of business aviation aircraft use John Tune, along with a lot of flight training that goes on there. In addition to that, there's a lot of helicopter activity normally down at John Tune. All of that stuff's turned off. That way we don't have to see them as we come in on an approach with the weather turned down, because everyone else will be thinking that it's a beautiful VFR day, which is exactly what it is if we looked outside. But for the sake of this, playing the game today, we're going to be doing some hard IFR. So we've got about a 200-foot ceiling right now, and I've set it up to be as best I can to give us visibility that'll kind of range between a mile and down to probably about a half mile, give or take. Right now it's up quite a bit, as you can see. If we're inside of the cockpit, it kind of varies. And what I do like about Microsoft Flight Sim and the way that it currently goes, it's a little bit more difficult than it was in previous iterations of the sim to select the visibility to be exactly what you wanted. So if you see the visibility based off of a METAR being one item, say half-mile visibility and winds, you can simulate the winds okay, specifically if you have the gust, but you've got to change what the relationship for how often the gusts happen, and that gets kind of confusing. But more importantly, the visibility ranges, and as a rain shower or a squall kind of moves through, you'll watch the visibility in the sim in the game drop down, which is very realistic for what you see in an actual aircraft. The difference is it's not as accurate if you're trying to shoot approaches that are down to very specified minimums. So it's a little bit more I want to say convoluted, but it's a little more difficult to really dial in visibility and cloud requirements in the sim now versus how the sim used to be. However, I will say, like I said already, from a realism standpoint, I think it's much, much better. So, all things said and done, we've already set up the FMS here. I've got it going over to John Tune. I've got Nashville set up as our alternate. I'm not going to go through that process, because if you want to see that, you should go back to my previous video on the Proline 21 introduction and tutorial. The entire first video shows about how to set up the FMS and all the logic that goes behind it. So go through that first if you haven't done it already. Otherwise, we're going to jump in with this one. I've set up my navigation. We're currently going to the Nashville VOR first. We're not actually going to touch it because it's too far away. It's 49 miles to get all the way to the other airport, direct line, straight distance. Looking at about 15 minutes. We're going to basically get up to 11,000 feet with an unrestricted climb, and then almost immediately be descending back down to start setting up for the approach into John Tune. We'll be doing the RNAV approach down there. I haven't loaded it yet. We'll do that along with the performance en route. You'll probably get to see a missed approach. You'll get to see a hold. And before you get going on that, if you haven't done this yet, and I hadn't, because I typically just fly these approaches down to landing in the sim, but every real airplane I've ever flown has a TOGA button somewhere, takeoff or go around. So TOGA, TOGA, is what it stands for. It's not listed as that in the sim. I think it's TO space GA. They kind of have it like that, but I would definitely recommend making a keybind for it, as it will make your go around procedure significantly easier. Have it on the yoke, have it on the thrust levers somewhere. I've flown aircraft that have it in both locations. I've seen it on yokes, I've seen it on thrust levers. But it's a great thing to have. By pressing the toggle button while you're on the ground with weight on wheels, it automatically puts your flight director in the takeoff mode. So takeoff, takeoff, takeoff for navigation, takeoff for your climb. And in the TOTO mode, you're going to get 10 degrees nose up attitude and basically wings level. We will have to make a swap once we get up to altitude here, once we start climbing out, because the airplane isn't going to capture the altitude in takeoff mode with the way the Proline 21 has been programmed inside of Microsoft Flight Sim. I have flown aircraft that will capture with the Proline 21 in takeoff mode. I have flown aircraft that will not capture in takeoff mode. So there's variation on it. Just note, it's not going to capture an altitude if you're in TOTO mode here. It will capture, actually, I don't believe it'll also capture the altitude in go-around mode. I always manage to switch it to a vertical speed of some sort. And it's going to be kind of similar to that in the real aircraft anyway. But before this gets too long and wordy, without further ado, let's get out of here. Pitch this up just so I can see a little bit of the runway, and brakes are off. Power's coming up. Speeds are set for flaps 15 departure, leaving off runway 26. All right, we've set power. Airspeed's alive. It's 80 knots. V1 and rotate. Have a positive climb. Gears coming up. And 400 feet. Flaps coming up. We'll hit the heading mode. And let's start making that turn. Pull our power back to climb. And I'm going to go ahead, double click vertical speed to get myself back into pitch mode, as I tend to enjoy flying in pitch a little bit more than flying in the vertical speed mode. Any mode will work. Let the airplane accelerate towards 250 knots as we depart the airport here. And once we get around on the heading, we'll engage nav mode so that we can intercept the course and then fly outbound direct to the Nashville VOR. And then here in a couple of seconds, we'll actually engage the autopilot, just not because I don't want to fly, just because I have a lot of talking to probably do as well. And that will lighten the workload ever so slightly. Sync up that pitch. Nav mode's engaged. Autopilot's still off. I'm still flying it by hand. Just trying to get things to where I'm kind of happy with them. You'll be right about there. All right, we're out of the top of the clouds. Let's go ahead and turn our autopilot on. All right, so we've got LNAV engaged. We're on the heading mode currently. Autopilot's on. And we're in a pitch mode, accelerating. I'm going to go ahead and do a flight level change now. Let the computer manage our speed at 250 as we climb to 11,000 feet. If I get really crazy, I'll increase the speed as we climb through 10. But we'll see about that. And let's take our range out a notch or two. We'll probably be able to see, there's John Tune Airport, Juliet Whiskey November right there. And we'll start loading up the approach. 10,000 for 11,000 feet. There's ALT's cap already, so it's not going to allow me to increase the speed that way. Just so we don't end up going too fast while I'm looking down, I'm going to start pulling the power back ever so slightly so that it'll accelerate very slowly here at 11,000 feet. It's such an abrupt altitude capture. Okay, so flying down here to John Tune Airport, we're going to go into the Depart Arrive page. We're going to have to double click it so that we go from the departure airport, which is what's showing right here, to get to the arrival airport. Click on Arrive, and we're going to do this RNAV runway 20. It's the arrival that's going to be coming from this direction. And there's a fix down here called Spare. That's the one that we're going to go ahead and select. Obviously, follow along on the approach plate that is currently up on your screen. We'll click Execute, and let's go ahead and go direct to Spare at this time. Execute. And let's go ahead and we'll talk about this arrival a little bit as we go through. So Spare is going to be our first fix that we're going to be flying to. It is the initial approach fix, and then between Spare and Baikal, the altitude is going to be 2,700 feet. At or above 2,700 matches. The final approach fix is Twitty, which is 2,500 feet. And then Jagus is inside of the final approach fix. It is 1,560 at or above. Then we go to the runway. Missed approach is a climb to 1,200 feet, then a climb and right turn to 3,000 feet, direct to bevy and hold. 1,200 feet, bevy at or above 3,000. That all matches. And it'll be a teardrop to entry at bevy. We don't see that on here, but I'm just talking off of what I'm seeing on the plate. All right, we've got a Todd in front of us for the descent down to 2,700 feet at spare. The 2,700 feet is showing up there. That is accurate and correct. We're going to go ahead and set 2,700 feet. Love it when it jumps like that. And then we'll click VNAV so that the nav is armed. We got V out right now, which is the mode we're currently in. The path is armed. You can see the path indicator is showing above, and we're currently at about 1,700 foot per minute descent being required. According to this, 1,600 feet per minute are the actual numbers. This is going to be an LPV approach. Back to the briefing here. So this is going to be an LPV approach. The DA is 856 feet. Here comes that Todd approaching. I'll start pulling the power back ever so slightly, just so the airplane isn't going faster than 250 as we come through 10,000 feet. And I'll need the extra time anyway, as we're going to be kind of close. And like I said, I do have a lot of instruction that I'm kind of giving as we go through this. So I was talking about the minimums. LPV mins is going to be treated just like a ILS approach. You've got a DA 856 feet is what you're looking at for the bottom altitude. If we click up here on the control panel, refs, that's going to give us this little highlighted box. And then you're going to use the bigger of the two knobs here in the center to scroll that down. You want to bring it all the way down to where it says minimums. You can set it to an RA, which is a radar altimeter, but every time I've ever flown this in a real aircraft, we always use the barrel here for our mins. We're going to set that to 860 feet. If you're using the RA, take note that you run the risk of having the radial altimeter. The radial altimeter only reads directly down, so it's looking at whatever the ground is around you. And as we fly into this airport, you're going to actually notice that the terrain is going to change a little bit because there are hills around it. And as a result of those hills, your radar altimeter could go off when you reach the actual altitude looking down before you've actually reached the minimum. So we're going to use it based off the barrel mins. This is an 856-foot LPV DA. The actual height above the airfield is going to be 355 feet. So take note of that. This is going to get us down to 355 feet. We do have weather and clouds, and the clouds should be down to about 200 feet. So odds are we're not going to see anything, and that means we're going to have to go missed. So when the time comes to go missed approach, we already said what we're going to do. We're going to climb to 1,200 feet, climbing right turn to 3,000 feet, direct to bevy and hold. I always recommend plan your approaches. If you're trying to do this, plan your approaches to understand that they should terminate in a missed approach. Expect that you're not going to see the runway. If you're thinking the worst case scenario, you'll be prepared for it when it occurs, as opposed to simply reacting and then trying to make it up as you go. And that's where people get behind the airplane. They start expecting to see something, and they don't. And when they don't know what their game plan is going to be for their next step. Then people get behind the airplane, they over-control it, and find themselves in dire scenarios, which oftentimes result in accidents or bent metal or death. So we don't want that. So let's try this out. We're going to fly to 1,200, climb to 1,200 feet, a right turn to 3,000, direct to bevy, and hold as we've discussed. When we do the go around in this, we are going to press the go around toga button. We already talked about it. You're going to, whatever button you keyed it up to be on your joystick or your throttle or wherever else, doesn't matter. If it's on your keyboard, put it where you want, but make sure you know what it is. Press that button. You're going to pull back ever so slightly on the stick while simultaneously increasing your power. You're also going to say to yourself, flaps 15, because we're going to be at landing flaps of 35 while we're shooting the approach. When you go to flaps 15, that's going to give you the ability to climb and not have all that extra drag sitting out there. Go to flaps 15. With the positive rate of climb, we'll select the gear up, and then we're going to reach up here, and you'll re-engage the nav source so that your flight director will follow the nav course, because you have to take it out of that go-around mode that's going to keep the wings just level. The other important thing about clicking that toga button is it's going to sequence the flight management system towards the missed approach, which is this little segment right here. Speaking of which, if we come in here to the display menu and go to page 2, you can toggle the missed approach to be on or off. That way you can see what's upcoming for you on the approach. I always like to see it. It's good to have. So I would definitely recommend to keep that on. It'll help you if you're actually flying instrument approaches in these airplanes. All right. That should be about it. But like I said, every jet aircraft I've ever flown, the call is always go around, set thrust, flaps to whatever the climb flap speed or the climb flap setting is going to be. In this case here, we're going to use flap 15. So go around, set thrust, flaps 15 with the positive rate of climb, landing gear up, set me up for the mist, which in this case, because we're doing an RNAV approach, we're already in long range nav. All you have to do is re-engage the nav mode. If we were shooting this on an ILS approach, you would actually have to switch the nav mode from green needles, which is what you'd have for the ILS, back into magenta needles by pressing the nav button here, then re-engage the nav mode. Also, reconfirm your altitude that you're going to be climbing up to, which should be already set at the moment that we get either glide slope intercept or the glide path intercept on these precision approaches. If you're doing it from an MDA, you would have to reset it after reaching the MDA. Hopefully that all made sense to you. MDA being a minimum descent altitude, it's necessary for, say, a VOR approach or an LNAV approach that is not LPV min. So if you're shooting this as just an LNAV MDA, not an LNAV VAV, which will still have a DA to it, but just a straight LNAV, you're going to have to set a minimum altitude, and then you're going to descend down to that altitude. Only last thing that I didn't do, let's put in some approach performance. JWN is already set. We'll go with 15 degrees. And for whatever reason, the altimeter setting doesn't automatically populate on this one. It's been giving me that trouble. I don't know if it'll do that for you. It should populate. Next, we need 2,600 feet to land and rough speed of 101, approach speed of 107. All right, so Twitty's our FAF. I want to be slowed down by the time we reach Twitty, so I'm going to go ahead and start pulling the power back, letting the airplane slow down. She slows down really nice anyway. We're going to zoom in one notch on our MFD so we can see a little bit better. And let's center up that heading bug. All right, so our final approach course is 198 degrees. There could be a little bit of wind that's going to affect that while we're up here. Our path is showing up. Let's arm the approach mode. Glide path is now showing up. Once we get to Twitty and we're on the approach, it will switch over to the GP and follow it in. As of right now, it's going to show this V out. And we can actually set our altitude all the way down to the minimum for the approach, which for us, we would set it to 900 feet because we're at 860. And there we go. That's set. Speed's good here. We're sitting here at or below 200 knots, which means we're already on path on speed so that we don't have to try to slow down and go down at the same time, as that can be considerably more difficult. Our TOD is just captured here with our flight, our VPAT, so now we are on the descent. And let's go ahead. There's GP. We'll go with the first notch of flaps. Power's coming back out. And since we have GP, we'll set our missed approach altitude. 3,000 feet is set. Let's go gear down. That'll help give us a little bit more drag. That'll slow us down a little bit. There's final flap speed. 1, 2, 3 green. Flaps going to full. And we're descending to 860 feet. We're going to let the autopilot stay on. It'll keep us right on the path, and it'll allow the airplane to trim itself out naturally for this arrival, which is going to be nice and easy. It really reduces your workload. I definitely recommend it. I will say the missed approach is going to be a hand flow missed approach. That's what you should expect to do. So step one is going to be kicking that autopilot off too. So I'll try to work my way through it and talk my way through it as I do it, as opposed to simply making it super fast. And that's the real key. Be very smooth with your power application, or else the airplanes can get a little bit squirrely. You're going to have a lot of trim in there that you'll have to take out. And it's nice to not be, I say, freaking out with it as you make your missed approach. Just always nice and smooth. All right, we're on speed. Sinking 500 feet per minute. And inside of 500 feet to the minimums. Gears down, flaps down. Clear to land. We're continuing on the approach. All right, it's 200 feet to the minimums. 500 feet above the ground. See that terrain's coming back up. We are now above 500 feet above the ground. And now you're back at 500 feet above the ground. Still not seeing anything. Minimums. Go around. Go around, buttons pressed. Autopilot's off. Increasing our power. Flaps 15. You have a positive rate of climb. Gears coming up. Getting rid of some of that trim. And we've got at least plus 20. We're going to go final flaps up. And let's go to the mist. Whoa. Nav mode set. That was the mouse head movement when I'm going to click something. All right. And we'll just follow those V-bars. And flight director right around on this missed approach. Altitude. 2,000 feet for 3,000 feet. Let's double click vertical speed so that we have it able to capture. Once again, I just put it back into pitch mode. Gears up, flaps up. We do the missed approach checklist for the other pilot who's sitting over there doing nothing but watching me fly. And outs cap. Start lowering the nose. Trimming out the airplane a little bit as we do. And we'll head towards the mist. I'm going to go ahead and accelerate back to 250 just to go there quicker. We can determine if we want to slow the airplane down below 200 knots after getting there, depending on what we want. A little pitch sensitive there. All right. And we'll get the autopilot back on. Autopilot showing. And we're going towards the missed approach. So there's the hold at Bevy. So at this point, you know, if you're flying out there with passengers, if you're flying for real, you're going to be starting talking to the other pilot. You're going to be discussing what you want to do next. Always things to consider: how much fuel you have on board. This case here, with this airplane and the way it sips fuel, we can fly around here for quite a while before we're going to have any type of fuel issues. So that's not going to be a concern. We've got lots of gas. So do we want to go around and try to shoot another approach down here at John Toon would be the conversation, or do you want to go over to the alternate airport? In this case here, we're just going to go ahead and save the time instead of trying to shoot another approach, which if you could see it, maybe as you flew over, you noticed the airport. Yeah, let's go ahead and give it another try. Maybe we'll have a little break in the weather and we'll be able to see it and land. Otherwise, yeah. Why mess around too much if you know that you have better weather at a different airport, or you have a better approach at the other airports, such as the ILS. And just so you know, we're kind of acting like the ILS is out here at John Toon because there is an ILS landing to the south, which would have gotten us down a little bit lower. Let me take a peek at that. The ILS runway 20, yeah, it goes down to 200 feet. It's a 200-foot ILS, so that takes us down to 701 feet, which most likely would have got us underneath that weather. But we know that the weather's good over there in Nashville, so let's go ahead and plan to go over to Nashville. I will show you something that's kind of funky here. So, historically, if you were going to be doing this approach, we're flying this airplane out here, we could put in from here, we've got the hold at Bevy, we could take KBNA and type it in. You don't have to, because you've already got it over here. If you go to your flight plan, previous page, you can just grab it, it'll drop it into the scratch pad. But if you go here, drop it in. Now you're going to go from here in this hold at Bevy direct to Nashville. The key to that is you're about to enter this hold. So you have to recognize that since you're entering this hold here, you will have to sequence the airplane out of the hold. So there we are. We're now into the hold. Slow the airplane down so that we don't fly 500-mile legs. I'll shut up in a minute so that we can speed this up to like 4 times speed. That way it looks a little bit more normal. I want to watch this thing try to sequence out of the hold because it doesn't do it in the way that it should in the aircraft. Right now, if I was to click exit hold, it should give me the opportunity to go direct to Nashville once it turns back inbound. The way this has been acting, it appears that it's going to make you hit bevy, still fly 1 full loop in the hold, and then exit the hold. But I want to see if it actually does that. So like I said, I'm going to shut up. Once we turn around, actually, no, we're going to do it now. I'm going to go ahead and hit exit hold. And we're going to see if it does a full loop. And like I said, I'm going to shut up so we can speed all this up. So we're going to hit exit hold, and here we go. So this is the spot where it should have exited the hold. Meh, it doesn't want to. We're going to let it go around the full turn and see if it actually exits on the time that comes back. Back to acceleration. All right, moment of truth. Let's see if it leaves the hold like it should have done the last time, this time. It's making a little turn. Let's see if it transitions to the next fix. Nashville, good. So it does a full turner in the hold like we were just saying, and then it's going to transition and sequence to the next fix that you have. All right, now you know it. Now we've seen it. Now I've tested it. I'm annoyed by it. Let's go ahead and move on. So we're going over to Nashville now. We're going to shoot an approach when we get over there. I will have to make an update, though, because if we go in here to depart arrive, what you're going to notice is the only thing you're arriving to is John Toon. There is not a spot down here for the alternate. So you have to take Nashville, drop it into the destination now, execute. It got confused. We're going back to Nashville. Execute that. And let's see here. That works out. Depart, arrive. Now you can see that it's been changed over to Nashville. We'll select the ILS. Let's do the runway 2. Let's do 2 center ILS. And just kind of plan that out. Let's see if we need a fix. ILS for 2 center. I just pulled up the plate myself. You guys will have it in a second. We can do it from Loretta, which is an intermediate fix. Let's see here. Looks like Shelbyville VOR is one of the options. Loretta is just an IF. We'll have to do it with radar vectors otherwise. So let's just go ahead and do it with vectors. Execute. Direct to Loretta. Execute. There we go. And with that, we're going towards the fix Loretta, 15 miles away. Power's coming up because we're not going slow. Forget that stuff. We're done with that holding. Let's get there, please. Take our range out just a little bit, and we'll go through and verify the fixes required for this approach. All right, so we're going to Loretta right now. The fixes are Loretta, which is at or above 3,000, Jackson at or above 3,000. Then we have Garth, which is at 2,500 feet. Garth is going to be your final approach fix. Then we're going to runway 02 center from there. Perfect. The missed approach, if we have to do it, is going to be a climb to 1,300 feet, then a climbing left turn to 4,000 feet. We'll go outbound on the Nashville VOR runway radial 016 to Tan's intersection, which Tan shows up next, and we'll hold at Tan's intersection. Once again, a teardropped entry at the hold. And in order to shoot this approach, we need, see here, 2,400 feet of RVR or a half-mile visibility, which we should be good with that. The DA is 787 feet. So we'll go ahead, we'll put that in. Once again, make sure that you're on the highlighted barrel section. Little knob, scroll down. 787, we'll set it to 790. And that will complete your approach prep. Currently just cruising there at 3,000 feet. Zoom in a notch. Looks like we're getting a little bit closer. Go previous. All right, there we go. So the one thing that I did have an issue with is that the aircraft didn't sequence. So normally you end up with ghost needles showing that you're coming in for this approach, and it didn't sequence for me last time properly, the last time I tried this. So I'm going to guess that it's going to do the same thing this time too. Like I said, we don't show the ghost needles, so it's going to essentially treat this like we're still in this RNAV phase of flight. I'm going to try something real quick. Center up this heading bug. Put it into heading mode. Depart arrive. I'm going to try to reselect the arrival. ILS for to center. Radar vectors. Flight plan discontinuity. Flight plan. Direct. Loretta. Execute. Alright, it still didn't show up. So for whatever reason, it's not showing up automatically like it normally does. This is currently set to auto. So it should, and it should tune everything for us and give us a nav-to-nav transfer. If it doesn't, we'll have to do it ourselves, which is fine. We can totally do that. I'm going to go ahead and put in the frequency for the localizer here, though, ourselves, which is 110.75. So we'll click that in. We're going to drop it into nav 1. So now we've got 110.75. We're still in the heading mode. I'm going to make the turn. Actually, let's make the turn outbound and give ourselves a better vector in. And I'm also going to center up 021, final approach course, execute. Now, odds are we're a little bit close to the path. Odds are we're going to go through the path as we come around. But I'm going to give us a left turn back to join up with that final approach course of 021. If we're close enough that we're able to intercept it without going through it, we'll go for that. But right now, I mean, we're at 3,000 feet, which is the altitude we need for Jackson anyway. We'll make that left turn, see if we get around in time, and if not, we'll continue back through and we'll re-intercept on the other side. Do have the message for check flight plan altitude. It was looking at that previous altitude there of being at 3,000 feet. It's wondering if we're going to be at the right altitude for the approach. We're more than good enough for the approach right now, so we'll just clear that out. Normally double-clicking it would take you back to the menu you were on. We'll click the legs again to bring us back to the menu we want to be on. As I said, there's the course coming around, so we're going to come back through it and intercept from the east side of the course. Like I said, I just brought us in a little bit too close to the final approach course. Poor vector by me. Not a big deal, just the way it goes. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and engage the nav mode. Actually, not the nav mode. I would like to engage the approach mode. We'll see. Like I said, it's just giving us this LNAV approach, which we've already selected the ILS. It should know that it's looking for the localizer, not any type of RNAV. We'll transfer it ourselves once we get ourselves established here on the LNAV version of the approach by clicking the nav button. As I said, that's going to switch our nav source from long range to short range nav, give us green needles. And if we have to adjust the course, it'll be 021 degrees. That's what we're looking for. And we'll just put that in if need be. All right, course is captured up. I'm going to go ahead and make the swap. There's the localizer. Approach mode's rearmed. It's captured the localizer. Glide slope's about to capture up. There it is. With the glide slope captured, our missed approach altitude is going to be 4,000 feet. Set. We're a mile from Garth. I'm pulling the power back to idle at this time in an attempt to get the airplane to slow back down so that we can start getting our flaps in. All right, there's the altitude of Garth. We are now 5 miles from the runway. Might need some boards to help slow it down. This is where you find yourself just a little bit behind the airplane. So open it up ever so slightly. And we'll get that first notch of flaps in. And once we do that and we start getting the gear down, everything's going to slow up really nicely anyway on the approach. We're still going to let the autopilot do a lot of the flying here just to keep it nice and smooth all the way in. All right, first notch of flaps is in. Speed brake's going closed. We are currently 1,000 feet above the minimums. Gear's coming down. All that extra drag is going to help us out quite a bit. And final flaps coming in. So as I said before, and you know what I didn't do? Oh no, I guess we did have the approach performance still in. It didn't change. You would want to make sure you reestablished it, but 107 knots will be fine. In a worst case scenario, if you ever forget it, like I had said in a previous video, you have the opportunity to just fly based off the donut right there and the one that's present on your indicated airspeed tape. All right, 500 feet above the minimums. Continuing. Approach lights are in sight at 12 o'clock. And they're now out of sight. We are continuing. The important thing, always stay inside. Don't try to jump out. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the autopilot. I'll fly these last few hundred feet by myself. Even if you see the approach, you got the runway inside 12 o'clock, keep your eyes on your instrumentation. Don't jump out and immediately say, oh, now I can land it based off of what I see outside. Those visual cues can go away in a heartbeat. If you go through a rain shower, they can disappear. And if that's the case, you're suddenly trying to transition yourself back to the inside. Always be ready for the go around, even though you're at your mins here in a couple of feet.
Minimums.
There's our minimums. I'm still inside, just as an FYI. I've flown these approaches down to 1800 RVR on a regular basis, and when you're doing that, you definitely stay inside until you're getting very close to the runway. Here we go. Power's coming out. There we go. We're on the ground at Nashville, establishing some brakes. And I think we'll make this right turn right here. Whoever put a taxi light in the middle of the taxiway should be reprimanded, quickly fired. I think that's enough for any day of flying. So I really appreciate you guys watching. I appreciate the comment on the last video, and hopefully this has helped you see how to shoot an RNAV approach, also how to shoot an ILS approach, how to set it up a couple of times, go through that process, etc. So hopefully that made some sense. Hopefully you can understand how to fly with the Proline 21 a little bit more now, and this will be informative for somebody. So if you've got any comments or questions, please leave it in there in the comments, like the videos if you can. Take a look at the tutorial if you have an interest in learning more about the Proline 21. And I appreciate you guys watching. Happy simming, and we'll see you around on the next video.